The cargo hauler drifter's promise wasn't much to look at scarred hull plating, mismatched engine pods, and a navigation system that hiccuped every third jump. But she was Marcus Reed's, bought with 10 years of saved credits and 3 near-death experiences he preferred not to remember. At 28, he'd learned that the best life was a simple one. Take the job, make the delivery, don't ask questions. The job posting had been straightforward enough. Transport one passenger from the Outer Rim Station Bellwether to the Coalition Refugee Processing Center at Meridian Point. No cargo, no complications. The credits were good, suspiciously good, but Marcus had stopped questioning windfalls. Years ago, he stood in the cramped docking bay, watching the passenger ramp extend with a pneumatic hiss. The station's artificial gravity felt too heavy after 3 weeks in the black, and he shifted his weight. Adjusting the worn flag jacket that had seen better decades, the passenger who emerged made him forget about the gravity. She was small, barely reaching his shoulder, wrapped in what looked like recycled emergency blankets stitched into a makeshift cloak. But it was her face that caught him, delicate features that seemed almost human, except for the subtle iridescence of her skin that shifted between pearl and pale lavender in the harsh docking lights. Her eyes were too large, the color of deep violets, and they held a wariness that Marcus recognized from his own mirror. "You're Marcus Reed?" Her voice was soft, melodic, with an accent that made each word sound like the beginning of a song. "That's me." He extended a hand, then hesitated, unsure of her species' customs. "You are?" "Sienna." She looked at his outstretched hand with curiosity before tentatively touching her fingertips to his palm. Her skin was cool, smooth, and left a faint tingling sensation. "Thank you for agreeing to transport me." "Credits are credits," Marcus said, more gruffly than he intended. He gestured toward the ship. "She's not fancy, but should get you where you're going. Trip should take about 6 days if we don't hit any trouble." Sienna followed him aboard, her eyes widening as she took in the cramped interior. The drifter's promise had been built for efficiency, not comfort. The main corridor was barely wide enough for 2 people to pass, lined with exposed conduits and storage lockers. Marcus had tried to tidy up, or at least shove the floating debris into corners, but the ship still smelled like recycled air and engine lubricant. "Your quarters," he said, palming open a door to reveal a space not much larger than a closet. A narrow bunk, a storage compartment, and a tiny sanitation unit. "Not much, but it's private." "It's more than I had yesterday," Sienna said quietly, setting down a small bundle that appeared to be her only possession. "I'm grateful." Something in her tone made Marcus pause. The job posting hadn't mentioned why she needed transport, but looking at her threadbare clothing and the shadows under those violet eyes, he could guess. Refugee, probably running from something. Everyone out here was running from something. "Right. Well, there's a galley down the hall. Rations aren't gourmet, but they're edible, mostly." He backed toward the door. "We leave in an hour. Once we're underway, you're free to move around, but the cockpit's off limits unless I say otherwise." "I understand." She looked up at him, and for a moment, Marcus felt pinned by those strange eyes. "You seem like a good person, Marcus Reed." "Don't bet on it," he muttered, escaping into the corridor. The departure from Bellwether went smoothly. Marcus had filed all the proper flight plans, paid the docking fees without complaining too much, and navigated the station's departure lanes with the ease of long practice. Once they hit open space, he engaged the autopilot and let himself relax for the first time in days. The first 3 days passed without incident. Sienna kept to herself, emerging only for meals and the occasional walk through the ship's limited corridors. She ate sparingly, seeming uncertain about which human foods were safe for her biology. Marcus found himself preparing simple meals, pointing out which rations were least likely to cause digestive issues. They didn't talk much. Marcus wasn't the talking type, and Sienna seemed content with silence. But he'd catch her sometimes, standing at the small viewport in the galley, staring out at the stars with an expression of profound loneliness. On the fourth day, everything changed. Marcus was running system diagnostics when the proximity alarm blared. He scrambled to the cockpit, fingers flying across the console. No, 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 he muttered, reading the display. A solar storm, massive and unexpected, was bearing down on their position. They were too far from any planet or station to seek shelter, and the storm would hit in less than 20 minutes. Marcus? Sienna appeared in the cockpit doorway, her luminescent skin seeming to glow brighter with anxiety. What's happening? Solar storm. Big one. He was already plotting an evasion course, but the numbers weren't good. Strap in. This is going to get rough. The storm hit like a hammer. The ship bucked and twisted, throwing them against their restraints. Marcus fought the controls, trying to keep them from spinning into oblivion. Lights flickered, alarms screamed, and somewhere deep in the ship, something important made a very bad sound. Then, as suddenly as it began, the turbulence ceased. They'd passed through the worst of it. Marcus took a shaky breath, running damage assessments. The results made his stomach sink. How bad? Sienna asked, her voice steady despite the white-knuckled grip she had on her seat. Environmental systems took a hit. Main heating arrays offline. He pulled up schematics, hoping for better news. He didn't find it. Backup systems are damaged too. I can reroute some power, but... He trailed off, doing quick calculations. Temperature's going to drop. Fast. How cold? Marcus met her eyes. Dangerously cold. We're looking at near freezing within 12 hours. Maybe less. Sienna's skin seemed to pale further. Can you repair it? Not without parts I don't have. We're 4 days from Meridian Point. He scrubbed a hand over his face. I can keep the cockpit and one other compartment marginally warm. But that's it. What do we do? Marcus was already moving, pulling emergency gear from storage compartments. Thermal blankets, survival suits, chemical heat packs, everything he'd accumulated over years of paranoid preparedness. We survive, he said grimly. We layer up, conserve power, and hope we don't freeze before we reach port. By the 8th hour, the cold had become more than uncomfortable. It was dangerous. Marcus had sealed off all but 2 compartments, routing every spare joule of power to maintaining life support and minimal heating. He wore 3 layers of clothing, and his breath still misted in the air. He found Sienna in her quarters, wrapped in every thermal blanket he'd given her, shivering violently. Her skin had lost its iridescence, turning a dull gray that he instinctively knew was wrong. You're freezing, he said, kneeling beside her bunk. My people, we come from a warm world, she managed through chattering teeth. This cold, it's shutting down my systems. Marcus made a decision. Come on, my quarters. I've got something that might help. He half carried her down the corridor to his own cabin, not much larger than hers. From his locker, he pulled out his most valuable possession, a military-grade emergency pod designed for survival in the harshest conditions. Self-heating, insulated, big enough for one person to ride out a disaster. Or 2 people, if they didn't mind getting close. Get in, he said, activating the heating elements. Sienna looked at the pod, then at him. It's too small for both of us. It'll fit, barely. He helped her climb in, then squeezed in beside her. The pod was indeed barely large enough, forcing them into close contact. Marcus tried to maintain some distance, but the pod's design made it impossible. Is this acceptable? Sienna asked. I don't know your customs about personal space. Right now, customs take a back seat to not dying, Marcus said. The heating elements hummed to life, and he felt the temperature gradually rising to something bearable. They lay there in awkward silence, the only sounds their breathing and the ship's distant creaks. Slowly, color began returning to Sienna's skin, the luminescence flickering back to life. "Thank you," she whispered. "You didn't have to share this with me." "Yeah, well." Marcus stared at the pod ceiling. "Can't collect my fee if you freeze." But they both knew it was more than that. In the enforced intimacy of the emergency pod, with 4 days still ahead of them, something had shifted. The barrier of stranger and passenger had cracked, revealing two people simply trying to survive the cold. Dark void together, dark and outside, the stars continued their ancient dance, indifferent to the small human ship and its even smaller cargo of hope. The emergency pod held heat well, but it held proximity even better. Marcus had spent the last 2 hours acutely aware of every point where his body touched. Sienna's her shoulder against his chest, her back pressed to his stomach, the way her silvery hair tickled his chin when she shifted. The pod forced them into a spooning position, and despite the layers of clothing between them, he could feel her gradually warming. "Marcus?" Her voice was soft in the darkness of the pod. "Yeah? How long can we stay in here?" He'd been doing the math in his head. Pod's battery will last about 16 hours on this setting. After that, we'll need to let it recharge for 8 hours before using it again. The ship's heating should recover enough by then to keep us from freezing, but it's going to be uncomfortable. "I see." A pause. "So we have cycles. Warmth, then cold, then warmth again. For the next 4 days, yeah." Marcus felt her shiver, despite the warming temperature. "You okay?" "My body temperature is still too low. My species requires more warmth than humans." She hesitated. "On my world, when the cold seasons come, we huddle together. Skin contact is the most efficient way to share heat." Marcus felt his throat go dry. "Skin contact. Yes, but I understand if your customs prohibit this. I don't wish to make you uncomfortable." He should say no, should maintain professional distance. But the rational part of his brain, the part that had kept him alive through countless emergencies, pointed out that she was still shivering, and that cold could kill her long before they reached Meridian Point. "It's not a custom thing," he said carefully. "It's just ... Among humans, that kind of contact usually means something. Between people who are, involved. Involved? Romantically, intimately." He felt his face heating despite the cold. "But you're right about the efficiency. If you're still cold, we should probably. I mean, if you're comfortable with it." Sienna twisted in the tight space, turning to face him. In the pod's dim emergency lighting, her violet eyes seemed to glow. "Would it bother you to see me unclothed?" "I'm human, not dead," Marcus said before he could stop himself. "But I can handle it. Professional distance and all that." A small smile curved her lips. "Professional distance while pressed together in a sleeping pod? You see the irony too, huh?" She began unwrapping the thermal blankets, then worked at the fastenings of her makeshift clothing. Marcus kept his eyes fixed firmly on the pod ceiling, though his peripheral vision betrayed him with glimpses of luminescent skin. "Your species has interesting taboos," Sienna observed, struggling with a particularly stubborn knot. "We view bodies as simply bodies. The shame or attraction comes from intention, not exposure." "That's actually a healthier way to look at it," Marcus admitted. He could hear the rustle of fabric. "You decent? Or I guess indecent. I've removed my outer layers. I kept a thin undergarment. Is this acceptable?" He risked a glance and immediately regretted it. The undergarment was nearly transparent, and her skin underneath was covered in intricate patterns that glowed with soft bioluminescent swirling designs that flowed across her shoulders, down her arms, across her collarbone. They pulsed gently, like breathing. Those markings, he managed. What are they? Luminal patterns. They appear when we reach maturity. She traced one that spiraled down her arm. They reflect our emotional state. Right now, they're pulsing slowly because I'm cold and tired. What do they look like when you're happy? Brighter, faster, like ripples on water. She looked at him expectantly. Will you remove your clothing as well? You're still generating most of the heat, but it would be more efficient without barriers. Marcus wrestled with himself for about 3 seconds before practicality won. He stripped down to his shorts, folding his clothes and tucking them into the corner of the pod. When he turned back, Sienna was watching him with undisguised curiosity. Your species has so much hair, she observed. On your chest, your arms, even your face. Yeah, we're a fuzzy bunch, Marcus said, trying to keep his tone light. Is that weird for you? No, just different. She reached out tentatively, her fingertips brushing the hair on his forearm. It's softer than I expected. The touch sent an unexpected jolt through him. Her fingers were cool, delicate, and the contact made the luminescent patterns on her own arm brighten slightly. Sorry, she said, pulling back. Was that inappropriate? No, it's fine. Just ... ticklish. He settled back into the pod. Come on. Let's get you warm. She curled against him, and Marcus wrapped his arms around her slender frame. Her skin was still too cool, and he could feel her trembling. He pulled her closer, trying to share as much body heat as possible. Better? He asked. Much better. Her voice was muffled against his chest. Thank you, Marcus. They lay in silence for a while, the only sound the soft hum of the heating elements. Marcus tried to think about anything except the feel of her body against his, the repairs needed, the navigation calculations, the various ways this situation could go wrong. But his mind kept wandering back to the woman in his arms, to the soft glow of her patterns against his skin. Marcus? Her voice was drowsy now, warmer. What are these? Her hand slid down his stomach, and he nearly jumped out of the pod when her fingers brushed against the waistband of his shorts, then dipped lower with innocent curiosity. Whoa! Hey! He caught her wrist gently, but firmly. That's definitely off-limits territory. She blinked up at him, genuinely confused. I felt something unusual through the fabric. Small, spherical. Are they part of your anatomy? Marcus felt his entire face burning. Yes, very much part of my anatomy. Very private part. Oh. Her patterns flickered with what might have been embarrassment. I apologize. I was simply curious about the physical differences between our species. My people don't have external structures like that. Yeah, well, we do. And touching them is definitely in the romantic involvement category of human customs. I see. She looked thoughtful. They seem rather vulnerably placed for something important. You're not the first person to point that out, Marcus said wryly. Evolution isn't always logical. What is their function? He stared at the pod ceiling, wondering how his life had led to this moment. Their reproductive organs, part of the system that creates offspring. Fascinating. Her scientific curiosity seemed genuine. And they must be kept at a specific temperature? That's why they're external? Something like that. Can we maybe talk about literally anything else? A soft laugh escaped her, the first he'd heard from her. Her luminescent patterns brightened, rippling with what he now understood was amusement. I've embarrassed you. Little bit, yeah. I apologize. On my world, we're taught anatomy from a young age. All species have different biology, and understanding it helps prevent ... misunderstandings. She shifted slightly, getting more comfortable. I should have asked before touching. It's okay. Cultural differences. He relaxed a fraction. So your people don't have. I mean, How do you reproduce? She seemed unbothered by the question. We have internal structures. The process is less mechanical than what I understand of human reproduction. It's more of an energy exchange. Energy exchange? Our patterns, she gestured to the glowing marks on her skin, they can synchronize with a mate's patterns. When they align perfectly, it creates the spark of new life. Her voice grew softer. My parents' patterns were said to be perfectly matched. When I was young, I could see them glow brighter whenever they were near each other. Were? Marcus caught the past tense. They died in the war. 3 years ago. The patterns dimmed. Our planet was caught between two larger powers. We were neutral, but neutrality means nothing to bombs. Marcus tightened his arm around her instinctively. I'm sorry. It's why I'm running. Why I need to reach the refugee center. There's nothing left to go back to. She was quiet for a moment. What about you, Marcus Reed? What are you running from? He should deflect, keep the walls up. But something about the darkness of the pod, the intimacy of their situation, the way she'd trusted him with her pain, it cracked something open inside him. Not running from, he said slowly. Running to. Or maybe just ... running. I grew up on a colony world. Small place, everybody knew everybody. My parents wanted me to take over the family business, marry a nice local girl, pop out some kids, live the predictable life. But you wanted something else. I wanted the stars. Sounds corny, but I used to lie on the roof at night and watch the ships come and go, and I thought, there's so much out there, so much to see. He laughed bitterly. So I left. Broke my parents' hearts. Disappointed everyone who'd invested in my future. Bought this rust bucket and spent 10 years proving I could make it on my own. Do you regret it? Marcus considered the question. Yes and no. I got what I wanted: freedom, independence, the stars. But it's lonely. Most nights, I'm the only person on this ship. No one to talk to. No one who cares if I live or die. Just me and the void. Sienna's hand found his, her fingers intertwining with his own. You're not alone right now. No, he agreed quietly. I'm not. Her patterns began to pulse in a slower, steadier rhythm, the rhythm of contentment, he realized. She was finally warm enough, finally relaxed enough. He could feel her breathing evening out as sleep pulled at her. Marcus? Yeah? Thank you for sharing your warmth with me. In my culture, this would create a bond. A debt of life. You don't owe me anything, Sienna. Perhaps not a debt, then. Her voice was barely a whisper. But something. A connection. Before he could respond, her breathing deepened into sleep. Marcus lay awake, feeling the gentle rise and fall of her chest against his, watching the bioluminescent patterns on her skin pulse in the darkness. Outside the pod, the ship creaked and groaned in the cold. But inside, wrapped around this strange, beautiful alien woman, Marcus felt warmer than he had in years, and for the first time in a long time, the loneliness that usually gnawed at him had quieted to nothing. He let himself relax, let his eyes drift closed, and followed Sienna into sleep. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, more cold, more time in impossible proximity, more opportunities for complications. But right now, in this moment, there was just warmth and companionship, and a quiet sense that something important had shifted between them, something that might be difficult to put back in its box when they finally reached Meridian Point.